Okay, so today's victim, we're gonna put some brakes on my Victory motorcycle. I've changed them one time before. The bike's got about 43,000 miles on it right now. I've changed the rear brakes once. I've not changed the front brakes. Front brakes actually look okay, but I'm gonna change them anyway because I've never changed them before. To show you guys what that's all about, how difficult it is to do. Rear brakes, I changed them once. The pads that are on it right now are the centered copper pads. From what I understand, they're supposed to be an upgraded brake pad. I personally don't care for them. I don't ride really hard, aggressive. I'm just more of a, my kids call it a geezer bike, you know, and that's the way I ride. I like to get out on two wheels, but I don't drag floorboards or anything like that. I just want a normal brake. The centered copper pads that are on the rear brakes right now, ever since they were new, I mean, they sound almost like metal on metal. They don't sound like a semi-metallic or an organic brake pad like you're used to on an automobile, you know, just a normal replacement brake pad. And these haven't been on very long. I'm guessing 10 or 15,000 miles probably. And all of a sudden, last time I rode the bike the other day, rear brakes are basically gone. It sounds like it's metal on metal now. So we're gonna go ahead and take it down and put all new brake pads all the way around on this bike. We'll show you what that's about. Okay, I do have the bike on my motorcycle jack. You do not have to jack it up off the floor to change the brakes on these bikes, but I prefer to. It's just more comfortable for me. I'm tired in my old age of crawling around on the floor if I don't have to. That's one reason I put it in the two-post lift. It'll help me out. So first thing is you got to remove the left side bag. Really easy on these bikes. You just turn these little knobs on the inside and the bag just lifts right off. And that exposes the brake. Okay, you can see a little bit of grooving just barely starting on this rotor. It's still smooth. You can just see a little bit of a difference around the outer diameter here. So I think I'm probably correct that the pads are probably pretty well gone. So we'll pull it off and see. The caliper on this bike is hanging underneath the swing arm here. So we'll have to change the view from underneath so you can see it. First thing we have to do is make a little space. Basically press the pistons back into the caliper. There are two pistons here, and we gotta get them both kind of pressed back in, make some room for those new pads. The best way to do it is to get in here with a little flat screwdriver between the rotor and the pad and just apply a little constant pressure, kind of a twisting motion. And you can feel the piston pressing back in and making some more space here. And make sure you kind of get on down to that second piston on down at the bottom. So I'm making sure that everything's pressed as well as I can, all the way top to bottom. Feels like it's back solid now. Okay, the next thing is to remove this one bolt right here. You can see the caliper sort of loose where there's room in the pistons now. So this takes an 8mm socket, and it looks like I may have to use an 8mm wrench. I can get it in there. It's tight with a socket in there, but it will work. A shallow well will probably work better. Ratchet's hitting the muffler, but we'll make do for right now, and I'll change to the shallow well when I put the bolt back in. And this bolt will have a little bit of tension on it because there's a spring clip on the back here that applies pressure to the pads to keep them from rattling, and it puts a little pressure on this bolt as well. So pull the bolt out, and then the brake pads will slide up and out of the way. And brake pads aren't quite as bad as I thought they were. This is the outer pad. It's still got maybe 1/8 of an inch at the most. Let's see what the inside pad looks like. Yeah, that was about the same. They do have a little bit of material left, but as I said before, I didn't really care for these pads anyway. They make more noise, and I don't like the way they feel. I mean, it sounds like sandpaper on my rotor all the time. So I'm going back to a semi-metallic brake pad. Okay, these are my new brake pads. I got these from Drag Specialties. You see that one of them has a noise reduction pad thing on the back, squeal silencer thing. The other one does not. Now the one with the metal goes to the inside. The ones without the metal goes to the outside against the pistons. The way that you can tell that is these pads will only go in one direction. They have a hole in the top that the pin goes through that locks the pads into the caliper. They'll only fit one way in order for that to end up on the top. You can't put them in backwards because then your pads will be backwards. Obviously the braking material goes against the rotor. So that's pretty simple. Now the hardest part about installing these is this little notch at the bottom of the pad. That slides in blind and you can't see down in there, but that kind of sets into a little pin in the bottom of the caliper. It's very difficult, can be very difficult to get that to line up just right. And the only way that you can tell that that is in the right location is when your pin, the hole up here at the top will line up and your pin will go in it. So that can be a little bit of a challenge, but be patient and you'll get it. Okay, I had to finagle with it quite a bit, but I finally ended up getting it. The old pin, it does come with a new one, but the old one, it does have an O-ring on the end of it here. The new pin that came with my Drag Specialties brake pads does not have that little O-ring on it. So if you choose to replace your pin, make sure you put that O-ring, off of one over to the other. I assume that kind of helps to keep down a little bit of noise. Honestly, there's nothing wrong with my old pin. I'm not going to bother to risk damaging that O-ring to change it. I'm just going to use the old pin myself. But once you get everything kind of finagled, I found it helpful to push the caliper in order to get me all the space I could on the back side to make sure I got that pin lined up so the pin will actually slide through it, and then pull the caliper back to the outside, push the slack back to the outer side so that you can work in this outer pad. I had a hard time with the outer pad trying to get it to slide in the right groove here on the bottom, but on this outside you can kind of see what you're doing. The insides are blind, you can't see nothing. But on the inside I was able to take a small flat screwdriver in here in the bottom of the caliper and help me try to get the pad lined perfectly to go in that bottom slot, and I finally got it to where the pin will slide in without any issue. Not too difficult, just a little bit aggravating really. So slide your pin back in and tighten it back down. Let's switch to my short socket. I went to a 1/4 inch ratchet while I was at it. You don't need a lot of torque on this. Try to keep blood off everything. No need to try to wring it off. Just tighten it, snug it down good so it doesn't come loose. It is a very small bolt. The head of that bolt's 8mm, so you could wring it off pretty easily if you tried. As with any brake job, after you put in new brake pads, make sure to pump up the brakes. Step on the brake pedal a few times to get that slack taken back up out of those pads, because there's going to be extra space in there right now where we backed off the pistons and put in new pads. So we'll do that right now before we forget it. Because the first couple of times you step on the pedal, there won't be anything there. You'll have to pump it up 2 or 3 times to take up that slack. Okay, so rear brake is finished. I'll reinstall my saddlebag and move on to the front brakes. Okay, safety moment for the day. I said I cut a chunk out of my thumb, and I did. If I can turn my hand around here. There it is, if it'll focus. Anyway, if you've got one of these little handy dandy fold up aluminum stools from Harbor Freight, I was sitting straddle on the thing and picked it up, and these legs will kind of fold out sometimes. And I got my thumb hung in between there and I sat back down on it. So I cut a chunk out of my thumb. But that's how it goes. That's part of mechanics, right? Leave a little bit of blood on everything you work on. Okay, front brakes. Looks like it's going to be fairly simple. It looks like probably just remove that one bolt there. This clip will fall out, and then the pads probably slide out of the back. We'll see here. Okay, it's a 5mm Allen. Wish I had a way to hold the light up here. One important thing to remember is the spring clip here. Pay real close attention to how that spring clip is in there, what direction it is, because once you take this bolt out, it puts a little pressure on this bolt, and this bolt goes through both of the brake pads. But pay attention to how it goes in, and before you take it out. Okay, and once it's got it loose, it'll have a little bit of tension on it because of that spring clip. There it comes. Okay, there's my bolt. I'm going to pay real close attention to that spring clip because it just falls out. And pay attention to what orientation it was and how the bolt went through. Okay, once you do that, there's your brake pads, and they'll slide in and out pretty easily. This is a 4-piston calipers. There's 2 pistons on this side and 2 pistons on the inside. Same as we did on the rear. We got to press those pistons back with the old brake pads, so we can make space for the new ones. So just like the rear, we'll use a screwdriver between the rotor and the old brake pads to make a little space. A little bit tough to get in there with the fender and all. Put a screwdriver in there and twist, basically. The other way you can do that is to remove these 2 bolts here and remove the caliper off of the rotor. But this should work very well. This is the most common way of changing the pads, I believe. Of course, there's a front pad and a rear pad. A little tough to get in there. Let's remove one of the pads and see if that doesn't give us a little more space to work with. And make sure you get all the pistons back in. If you don't make enough space, the new pads are not going to fit. These are kind of like the rear. They're not absolutely worn out. There's not a whole lot left in them though, right? So go ahead and replace them is not a terrible idea. Slide one back in the back side and see if I can get that side to move a little more. I want to make really sure that the pistons are compressed as well as possible. All 4 pistons. Let's see how that goes. I'm gonna grab the new pads and see how they fit. Okay, just like the rear, we got a matching set of semi-metallic drag specialties. And just like the rear, it comes with a new pin and a new spring clip. I happen to notice in this one, there's a little tiny O-ring right there. I suppose that goes on the end of the bolt. I bet the rear set had that little tiny O-ring in the packaging as well, and I just failed to see it. And need to pay closer attention, I suppose. Let's get these out of the packaging and see how well they fit. Put them in enough space. And be careful of that tiny little O-ring. Not a bad idea to go ahead and put it on there right now before we don't lose it. It's the smallest O-ring I think I've ever messed with. I might have to go get me a little pick or something to do that. There it goes. Okay, O-ring on the new pin so I don't lose it. Okay, slide the new brake pads in. Maybe. Yeah. Same size as the rear. I'm just not holding my mouth right, I guess. Okay, plenty of room on the outside. I guess my pistons are just not in well enough on that back side, so let's work on that a little bit. The outside, they work great. Inside, not so much. The old pad fits. Again, you're trying to get between the old pad and the rotor and just twist that flat screwdriver and just hold constant pressure on it to press that piston back in. Okay, let's see what that does. New pad. And new pad. Okay, got enough room. Okay, the pads will slide all the way through too far, so it's a good idea to make sure, kind of test your pin, make sure that everything's kind of lined up, all the holes are lined up. We set the new clip in the same orientation that the old one came out, and it just sits in there, and then the bolt goes through. You gotta use your finger kind of on the bottom side through the rotor here to maneuver the brake pad a little bit, because they do move around. Make sure you go over top the center of that clip through the hole in the other brake pad, and then finally in the back side, and tighten down the bolt. Okay, now that we've done it once, the other side should be easier, right? Isn't that how that goes? Okay, side number 2. And what's holding tension on that center bolt is the center part of that spring. Kind of press in on that, and that'll release the bolt. Again, pay close attention to how that spring clip is oriented. Put it back exactly the way it came off. Make some space. Okay, that's the back piston, or the back pistons. Same thing on the brake pads. Not a whole lot of life left. You can see how I'm twisting the screwdriver and just holding pressure, and that's pushing those pistons back in. Work on all 4 pistons, the outside pad and the inside pad. Make sure you get it in all the way, as far as you can. It feels pretty good. Okay. Open up our new pads. Being very careful of that little tiny O-ring that's inside the packaging. Put that O-ring on the pin before you forget about it. If you drop it, you still got the original pin. Don't have to replace it. Okay, new pin. New pad in the back. New pad in the front. Holes look like they line up fairly well. Lay the clip in. The pads will move when you let it clip in, so you gotta kind of play with everything here to get everything to go through exactly right. Get the pin to go over the top of the center portion of that spring clip, and then through the inside pad. Where's it at? There it is. Then on into the hole. Simple as that. And just like the rear, anytime you do brakes, very first thing, pump the brakes up. Otherwise you will not have brakes when you're done. I gotta say, that took like 10 pumps of the handbrake, the front brake, in order to take up all that space. Remember, you got 4 pads there. That's quite a bit of area to take up. So if you want brakes when you take off down the road, make sure you pump up your brakes. So that's it. Brake job on a cross country.